I'm Michael, and this is
Hey
Wise,
there,
where the
and
dollar
welcome
talks,
to what
the
might
market
be the
breathes,
most
and the
important
news comes
conversation
from.
you'll have
Let's
about
go.
your money this
Breathe easy.
year. I'm going to be straight with you. If you're like most Americans, your finances probably aren't where you want them to be. And that's not your fault. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The Federal Reserve found that only about 1 in 3 Americans actually has a written financial plan. Think about that for a second. We plan our vacations, our weekend barbecues, even our Netflix binges, but when it comes to the money that literally determines our quality of life, most of us are just winging it. Look, I get it. Personal finance feels overwhelming. Between credit scores, retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and budgets, it's like learning a foreign language while juggling flaming torches. But here's what I've learned after years of helping people sort out their money. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, the most successful people I know keep it surprisingly simple. Over the next 15 minutes, we're going to tackle the foundation of personal finance, figuring out where you actually stand right now, and creating a system that works for your real life, not some theoretical perfect world. Understanding your current financial reality. All right. Let's start with something that makes most people squirm. Taking an honest look at your financial situation. I know, about as fun as a root canal, right? But stick with me here, because this is where everything changes. First thing we need to calculate is your net worth. Don't let that fancy term scare you. It's actually pretty straightforward. Net worth is simply what you own minus what you owe. That's a dot, so grab a piece of paper or open up a notes app on your phone. On one side, write down everything you own that has value. Your checking account, savings account, that 401k you've been ignoring, your car, your house if you own one. Even that vintage guitar collecting dust in your closet, if it's worth something. Write it down. Now, here's the part that might sting a little. On the other side, list everything you owe. Credit card balances, student loans, your mortgage, that money you borrowed from your brother-in-law last Christmas. All of it. Subtract what you owe from what you own, and boom, there's your net worth. Don't panic if it's negative. You're not alone, and more importantly, you're about to change that. But net worth is just part of the picture. We also need to understand your cash flow, basically, how money moves in and out of your life each month. Here's where most people get tripped up. They know roughly what they make, but they have no clue where it all goes. Sound familiar? Let me tell you about Sarah, a nurse I worked with last year. She was making decent money, about $55,000 a year, but somehow always felt broke. When we sat down and tracked her spending for a month, she discovered she was spending over $300 monthly on subscription services. Netflix, Spotify, that meditation app she used twice, a meal kit service she forgot to cancel. It all added up. The point isn't to become a penny-pinching miser. It's about being intentional with your money instead of letting it slip through your fingers. To get a handle on your cash flow, you need to track both sides of the equation. Your income is probably pretty straightforward. Salary, maybe some side hustle money, investment returns if you're already investing. But expenses? That's where things get interesting. You've got your fixed expenses, rent or mortgage, insurance, car payments. These don't change much month to month. Then you've got your variable expenses, and these come in 2 flavors. The necessary ones like groceries, gas, utilities, and the fun ones like dining out, entertainment, shopping sprees. Here's a pro tip that nobody talks about. Use your bank statements from the last 3 months to categorize every single transaction. Yes, it's tedious. Yes, you'll probably discover some spending that makes you cringe. But this exercise alone will change how you think about money, setting goals that actually work. Now that you know where you stand, let's talk about where you want to go. And please, for the love of all that's holy, don't just say, I want to be rich. That's not a goal. That's a wish you make when you blow out birthday candles. Good financial goals follow what business folks call the SMART framework, but I'm going to break it down in plain English. Your goals need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to your life, and time-bound. Instead of "I want to save money," try "I want to save $1,500 in the next 8 months for a vacation to Costa Rica." See the difference? One is vague hope. The other is a concrete plan. Let's break goals down into 3 categories based on timeline. Short-term goals are things you want to accomplish within the next year. These might include building an emergency fund, paying off a credit card, or saving for a new laptop. The key with short-term goals is making them specific, enough that you know exactly when you've achieved them. Medium-term goals span 1 to 5 years. This could be saving for a house down payment, paying off student loans, or building a significant investment portfolio. These goals require more planning and usually benefit from having milestones along the way. Long-term goals are the big ones: retirement, financial independence, maybe funding your kids' college education. These can seem overwhelming, which is why we break them down into smaller, manageable pieces. Here's something I've noticed after working with hundreds of people. The most successful ones don't just set financial goals. They connect those goals to their values and dreams. Take Mike, a teacher I know. He could have set a goal to save for retirement, but instead, he focused on having enough money saved so I can retire at 60 and volunteer at the local animal shelter. That emotional connection made all the difference when he had to choose between buying a new TV or contributing to his retirement account. The other thing successful people do is track their progress visually. Whether it's a chart on the refrigerator, an app on their phone, or a simple spreadsheet, they make their progress visible. There's something powerful about seeing that emergency fund grow from 0 to $500 to $1,000. It builds momentum. And here's a reality check. Your goals will change, and that's perfectly normal. Life happens. You get married, have kids, change careers, inherit money from a great aunt you barely knew. The important thing is to review and adjust your goals regularly, not abandon them entirely when circumstances shift. Building your first budget. All right, let's talk budgets. I know what you're thinking. Here comes the part where he tells me I can never eat out again and should make coffee at home. Relax. A good budget isn't about depriving yourself. It's about making sure your money is doing what you actually want it to do. The simplest and most effective budgeting method I know is called the 50-30-20 rule. It's not perfect for everyone, but it's a fantastic starting point. Here's how it works. 50% of your after-tax income goes to needs, rent, groceries, transportation, insurance, minimum debt payments. 30% goes to wants, dining out, entertainment, hobbies, that fancy coffee you love. 20% goes to savings and paying off debt. Beyond the minimums, let's say you bring home $4,000 a month after taxes. Using the 50-30-20th rule, you'd allocate $2,000 to needs, $1,200 to wants, and $800 to savings and extra debt payments. Now, you might be thinking, but my rent alone is more than $2,000, and you know what? You might be right. This is where budgeting gets real. If your fixed expenses are eating up more than 50% of your income, you've got some tough decisions to make. Maybe you need a roommate. Maybe you need to find a less expensive place, or maybe you need to increase your income. The beauty of the 50-30-20th rule is its simplicity, but don't feel like you're locked into these exact percentages. If you're drowning in high-interest debt, you might do 50-20-30, putting more toward debt elimination. If you're debt-free and want to retire early, you might flip it to 50-10-40. The key is finding a system you can actually stick with. I've seen people create these incredibly detailed budgets with 37 different categories, and they give up after 2 weeks because it's too complicated. Keep it simple, especially when you're starting out. Here's a practical tip. Automate as much as possible. Set up automatic transfers to your savings account right after payday. Pay your bills automatically. When the money disappears before you can spend it, you don't miss it. And please, build some flexibility into your budget. Life isn't predictable. Your car will need repairs at the worst possible time. You'll get invited to a wedding and need to buy a gift. Your budget should account for these curveballs, not pretend they won't happen. One last thing about budgeting. It's not about perfection. You're going to overspend in some categories and underspend in others. The goal is awareness and gradual improvement, not financial perfection from day one. Building your financial safety net. Emergency funds, your financial life jacket. Let's talk about something that could literally save your financial life, your emergency fund. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Emergency fund? I can barely pay my bills as it is. But hear me out, because this might be the most important thing we discussed. An emergency fund isn't just some nice-to-have luxury for rich people. It's your financial life jacket. Without it, every unexpected expense becomes a potential disaster. That could derail everything you're working toward. Picture this. You're cruising along, making progress on your debt, maybe even starting to save a little money. Then boom, your car breaks down and needs an $800 repair. Without an emergency fund, that repair goes straight onto a credit card, and suddenly you're not just back where you started, you're worse off. But here's what happens. When you have that emergency fund sitting there, that car repair becomes an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. You dip into your emergency money, fix the car, and then focus on rebuilding that fund. No new debt, no sleepless nights, no financial stress eating away at you. So how much should you have? The standard advice is 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. But let me be real with you. If you don't have any emergency fund right now, that probably sounds impossible. So let's start smaller. Your first goal should be getting $1,000 saved. That's enough to handle most minor emergencies without reaching for a credit card. Once you hit that milestone and celebrate it, because it's a big deal, then you can work toward the full 3 to 6 months. Here's the thing about those 3 to 6 months. Though it's not 3 to 6 months of your current spending. It's 3 to 6 months of your absolute essential expenses. What would you need to survive if you lost your job tomorrow? Rent, groceries, utilities, insurance, minimum debt payments. Not your Netflix subscription, not dining out, not your gym membership. Let me tell you about Rachel, a marketing coordinator who thought she needed $12,000 for her 6-month emergency fund because that's what she spent every 6 months. But when we broke down her actual essential expenses, she realized she could survive on about $7,000. That made the goal feel achievable instead of impossible. Where should you keep this money? Definitely not under your mattress, but also not in some investment account where it could lose value right when you need it most. A high-yield savings account is perfect. You'll earn a little interest, the money stays liquid, and there's no risk of losing principal. One more thing. Keep your emergency fund separate from your regular checking account. You don't want to accidentally spend it on groceries or convince yourself that concert tickets qualify as an emergency. Smart saving strategies that actually work. Now that we've covered emergency funds, let's talk about saving money in general. Because here's the truth. Most people are doing it wrong. They're trying to save whatever's left over at the end of the month, and surprise, surprise, there's never anything left. The secret to successful saving is flipping that equation. Instead of spending first and saving what's left, you save first and spend what's left. It's called paying yourself first, and it's a game changer. Set up automatic transfers from your checking account to your savings account for the day after you get paid. Start small if you have to. Even $50 a month is better than zero. The key is making it automatic so you don't have to rely on willpower or remember to do it. But let's talk about different types of savings accounts. Because not all of them are created equal. Your basic savings account at your local bank is probably earning you basically nothing, maybe 0.01% if you're lucky. Meanwhile, high-yield savings accounts are offering rates that are 50 to 100 times higher, moving your money from a traditional savings account to a high-yield account is probably the easiest money you'll ever make. On a $5,000 balance, the difference between 0.01% and 1.5% is about $75 a year. That's free money just for parking your cash somewhere smarter. Then you've got money market accounts, which typically offers slightly higher rates than savings accounts, but might require higher minimum balances. And certificates of deposit, CDs, which lock up your money for a specific period in exchange for guaranteed returns. Here's a strategy that works really well. Ladder your savings based on when you'll need the money. Emergency fund goes in a high-yield savings account for easy access. Money for a vacation next year might go in a 12-month CD for a slightly better rate. Money you won't need for several years could go into longer-term CDs or even start moving toward investments. Other things successful savers do is automate their savings increases. Every time you get a raise, increase your automatic savings by half the raise amount. So if you get a $200 monthly raise, increase your savings by $100. You still get to enjoy some of that extra income, but you're also building wealth faster. And here's a psychological trick that works. Give your savings account specific names and goals. Instead of just savings account, call it Costa Rica Vacation Fund or House Down Payment Fund. When you see that balance growing toward a specific goal, it's way more motivating than just watching numbers increase for no particular reason. Conquering debt like a boss. All right, let's tackle the elephant in the room for most Americans: debt. If you're carrying debt, especially high-interest credit card debt, you're not alone. The average American household has over $6,000 in credit card debt, and that's not counting student loans, car payments, and mortgage. But here's what you need to understand. Not all debt is created equal. Some debt, like a mortgage on a house that's appreciating in value, or student loans that helped you increase your earning potential, can actually be considered good debt. It's debt that helps you build wealth over time. Credit card debt, on the other hand, is almost always bad debt. You're paying interest rates of 15, 20, sometimes 30% or more, often on purchases that lose value immediately. If you're carrying credit card balances month to month, eliminating that debt should be your top priority. After building a small emergency fund, there are two main strategies for paying off debt, and they both work. It just depends on your personality. The first is called the debt snowball method. You list all your debts from smallest balance to largest, make minimum payments on everything, and throw every extra dollar at the smallest debt until it's gone. Then you take that payment and add it to the minimum payment on the next smallest debt. The psychological win of eliminating debts completely, even small ones, can be incredibly motivating. I've seen people get so fired up after paying off their first credit card that they find ways to cut expenses and increase income they never thought possible. The other approach is the debt avalanche method. Same idea, but you order your debts by interest rate instead of balance. You attack the highest interest rate debt first, which saves you more money mathematically. Let me give you a real example. Jennifer had 3 debts: a $3,000 credit card at 24% interest, a $10,000 personal loan at 12%, and a $5,000 student loan at 5%. Using the snowball method, she'd pay off the credit card first, then the student loan, then the personal loan. With the avalanche method, she'd tackle the credit card first, then the personal loan, then the student loan. Both methods work. But here's my take. If you're the type of person who needs quick wins to stay motivated, go with the snowball. If you're more analytical and the math matters more to you, Choose the avalanche. The best method is the one you'll actually stick with. Now, what if your debt feels overwhelming? What if you've got multiple credit cards, personal loans, maybe even some collections accounts? Don't panic. You have options. Debt consolidation might make sense if you can qualify for a personal loan with a lower interest rate than your credit cards. Just be careful, consolidation isn't magic. If you don't change the spending habits that got you into debt in the first place, you'll just end up deeper in the hole. Balance transfers can also work if you're disciplined. Moving high-interest debt to a card with a 0% promotional rate gives you breathing room to pay down the principal. But here's the catch. Those promotional rates don't last forever. And if you don't pay off the balance before the rate jumps, you could be worse off than when you started. The most important thing about getting out of debt is changing the behaviors that created the debt in the first place. That means building a budget you can stick to, using cash or debit cards instead of credit, and finding ways to increase your income, if necessary. Investment basics for regular people. Once you've got your emergency fund in place and you're making progress on high-interest debt, it's time to start thinking about investments. And I know the investment world can seem intimidating. All those charts and graphs, people throwing around terms like PE ratios and market volatility. It's enough to make you want to stuff cash under your mattress. But here's the truth. Successful investing doesn't require you to become a Wall Street expert. Some of the most successful investors I know follow incredibly simple strategies. Let's start with the basics. When you invest, you're essentially buying a piece of something that you hope will be worth more in the future. With stocks, you're buying tiny pieces of companies. With bonds, you're lending money to companies or governments in exchange for regular interest payments. The key principle behind all investing is this: the earlier you start, the more time compound interest has to work its magic. Let me give you an example that'll blow your mind. Say you start investing $300 a month at age 25, earning an average of 7% annually. By the time you're 65, you'll have about $1.2 million. But if you wait until you're 35 to start, you'll only have about $560,000, less than half, even though you only waited 10 years. That's the power of compound interest. Your money doesn't just grow, the growth grows too. For most people just starting out, the simplest approach is investing in low-cost index funds through something like a 401k at work or an IRA you set up yourself. Index funds basically buy a little piece of hundreds or thousands of companies, so you're instantly diversified without having to research individual stocks. Speaking of 401 kiloseconds, if your employer offers matching contributions, that should be your absolute first investment priority. It's literally free money. If your company matches 50 cents for every dollar you contribute up to 6% of your salary, and you're not contributing at least 6%, you're leaving money on the table. Here's a simple investment strategy that works for most people. Put money consistently into low-cost index funds. Don't try to time the market and ignore the daily noise. The stock market goes up and down in the short term, but over long periods, we're talking decades, it has consistently trended upward. The biggest mistake I see new investors make is getting too fancy too fast. They want to pick individual stocks, trade options, invest in cryptocurrency, basically anything except the boring, proven approach of consistent investing in diversified funds. Save the fancy stuff for when you really understand it and can afford to lose the money. For now, focus on building the habit of investing regularly and learning the fundamentals. *** retirement planning. The reality check. Let's talk about something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable: retirement planning. I get it. Retirement feels like this distant, abstract concept, especially if you're in your 20s or 30s. But here's what I've observed from watching people navigate their financial journeys. The ones who start thinking about retirement early are the ones who actually get to retire comfortably. Here's a sobering reality check. Social Security probably won't be enough to maintain your current lifestyle in retirement. The average Social Security benefit is around $1,800 a month. Could you live on that? Maybe, but it wouldn't be comfortable for most people. What I find fascinating is how the retirement landscape has completely shifted over the past few decades. Our parents' generation often had pensions, guaranteed monthly payments for life after working for the same company for 30 years. Those are basically extinct now. The responsibility for retirement planning has shifted entirely to us as individuals. The good news is that we have some powerful tools available. The 401k has become the primary retirement vehicle for most Americans. And if you understand how to use it effectively, it can be incredibly powerful. Here's what I've noticed about successful retirement savers. They treat their 401k contribution like a non-negotiable bill. They don't think of it as optional money. They can skip when times are tight. It comes out automatically, just like their rent or car payment. The traditional rule of thumb is to save at least 15% of your income for retirement. But honestly, that number can feel overwhelming when you're starting out. What I've seen work better is starting with whatever your employer matches, then gradually increasing your contribution by 1% each year. Let's say your company matches up to 3% of your salary. Start there. Next year, bump it up to 4%. The year after, 5%. Before you know it, you're saving a meaningful amount without feeling like you took a massive pay cut all at once. One thing that surprises people is how different retirement account types work. With a traditional 401k or IRA, you get a tax deduction now, but you'll pay taxes when you withdraw the money in retirement. With a Roth 401k or Roth IRA, you pay taxes now, but your withdrawals in retirement are tax-free. Which one should you choose? Well, it depends on your situation, and this is where you might want to talk to a tax professional. But generally speaking, if you're early in your career and in a lower tax bracket now than you expect to be in retirement, Roth accounts can make sense. If you're in your peak earning years and a high tax bracket, traditional accounts might be better. The key insight I want to share is this. Retirement planning isn't just about accumulating a big pile of money. It's about creating a system that will generate income for potentially 30 or 40 years after you stop working. That's a long time, and it requires thinking beyond just saving money. Insurance, the boring stuff that matters. Let's talk about insurance, probably the least exciting topic in personal finance, but one that can absolutely make or break your financial plan. I've seen too many people work for years to build up their savings, only to lose it all because they didn't have adequate insurance coverage. Think of insurance as a transfer of risk. You're paying a relatively small amount each month to make sure that if something catastrophic happens, you won't be financially ruined. It's not about the monthly premium, it's about protecting everything else you're working to build. Health insurance is obviously crucial, especially in the United States where medical bills are the leading cause of personal bankruptcy. If you get health insurance through your employer, you're lucky. Group plans are typically much cheaper than individual plans, but even then, understand what you're getting. Know your deductible, know your out-of-pocket maximum, understand which doctors and hospitals are in your network. If you're self-employed or your employer doesn't offer health insurance, you'll need to shop for coverage on your own. This is where it gets tricky, and honestly, the options can be confusing. The general principle is to get coverage that protects you from catastrophic expenses, even if it means higher deductibles for routine care. Auto insurance is required in most states, but beyond the legal minimums, you want enough coverage to protect your assets. If you cause an accident and don't have adequate liability coverage, you could be personally responsible for damages that exceed your policy limits. Here's something most people don't think about. Umbrella insurance. This is additional liability coverage that kicks in when your auto or homeowner's insurance limits are exceeded. It's relatively inexpensive, often just a few $100s a year, but it can provide millions in additional coverage. Life insurance is another area where I see a lot of confusion. The basic question is, if you died tomorrow, would anyone be financially harmed? If you're single with no dependents, you probably don't need life insurance. But if you have a spouse, kids, or anyone who depends on your income, life insurance becomes important. Term life insurance is usually the way to go for most people. It's pure insurance. You pay a premium, and if you die during the term, your beneficiaries get the death benefit. Whole life or universal life insurance combines insurance with an investment component, but the investment returns are typically poor compared to what you could get investing that money separately. The rule of thumb for life insurance coverage is 10 times your annual income, but that's just a starting point. Really think about what your family would need if you weren't there. Mortgage payments, kids' college expenses, daily living costs, and for how long. Advanced strategies and tools. Now let's talk about some strategies that can accelerate your financial progress once you've got the basics covered. These aren't magic bullets, but they can make a meaningful difference over time. Tax optimization is one area where many people leave money on the table. I'm not talking about anything fancy or questionable, just basic strategies that the tax code allows. Things like maximizing contributions to tax-advantaged accounts, understanding when to itemize deductions versus taking the standard deduction, and timing certain expenses or income recognition. For example, if you're close to the limit for contributing to a Roth IRA but your income is slightly too high, you might be able to do what's called a backdoor Roth conversion. You contribute to a traditional IRA and then convert it to a Roth. It's a legitimate strategy, but the rules are specific, so you'd want to research it thoroughly or consult with a tax professional. Health savings accounts are incredibly powerful. If you have access to them, you need to be enrolled in a high-deductible health plan, but if you are, HSAs offer a triple tax advantage. Your contributions are tax-deductible, the money grows tax-free, and withdrawals for qualified medical expenses are tax-free. After age 65, you can withdraw money for any purpose without penalty, though you'll pay regular income tax on non-medical withdrawals. Asterisk. Real estate investing is something a lot of people are curious about, and it can be a great wealth-building tool. But it's not passive income like some people think. Being a landlord is work. You're dealing with tenants, maintenance issues, vacancies, and market fluctuations. Before jumping into real estate, make sure you understand the time commitment and have adequate reserves for unexpected expenses. Side hustles and additional income streams have become increasingly popular, and technology has made it easier than ever to monetize skills or assets you already have. The key is finding something that leverages your existing skills or interests, rather than just trading more time for money. But here's what I've observed. The most successful people don't just focus on making more money. They focus on increasing the gap between what they earn and what they spend. You can make $1 million a year and still be broke if you spend $1.1 million. Conversely, you can live comfortably and build wealth on a modest income if you're intentional about your spending. Technology can be a huge help in managing your finances, but don't get overwhelmed by apps and tools. Pick a few that you'll actually use consistently. Maybe that's a budgeting app that connects to your bank accounts, or an investment app that makes it easy to contribute regularly to your portfolio. The best tool is the one you'll actually use. Building wealth over time. Let's wrap up by talking about what wealth building actually looks like for regular people. Because here's the thing, most millionaires didn't get there by winning the lottery or inheriting money or starting the next Facebook. They got there through consistent, disciplined financial habits over long periods of time. The research on this is pretty clear. The typical millionaire is someone who lived below their means, invested consistently, avoided lifestyle inflation, and stayed patient. They drove reliable used cars instead of financing new ones. They bought houses they could afford and stayed in them for years. They cooked at home more often than they ate out. None of this is glamorous or exciting, which is probably why it doesn't get talked about much, but it works. One pattern I've noticed among successful wealth builders is that they automate their financial lives as much as possible. They set up systems so that the right financial behaviors happen without requiring daily decisions or willpower. Their 401k contributions come out automatically. Their savings transfers happen automatically. Their bills get paid automatically. This removes the friction and the emotional decision-making from financial management. You're not asking yourself every month whether you feel like saving money or investing money. It just happens. Another key insight is the importance of staying flexible as your circumstances change. Your financial plan at 25 should look different from your plan at 35, which should look different from your plan at 45. Major life events, marriage, kids, career changes, inheritance, all require adjusting your strategy. The people who build lasting wealth also tend to continue educating themselves about money throughout their lives. They read books, listen to podcasts like this one, maybe work with financial professionals when they need specialized guidance. They understand that personal finance isn't something you learn once and forget about. It's an ongoing process. But perhaps most importantly, they keep perspective on what money is actually for. Money isn't the goal, it's a tool to create the life you want. Whether that's financial security, the ability to help family members, funding your kids' education, traveling the world, or just having the peace of mind that comes with financial stability. The beautiful thing about personal finance is that small, consistent actions compound over time into significant results. Every dollar you save, every debt payment you make, every investment contribution you put in, they all add up. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be consistent and patient. Remember, building wealth isn't about depriving yourself today so you can be rich tomorrow. It's about finding a sustainable balance that lets you enjoy life now while also building security for the future. The goal is to create a financial foundation that gives you options and freedom, not one that makes you miserable along the way. *****. The psychology of money. Why smart people make dumb financial decisions. Let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention in personal finance discussions: the psychology behind our money decisions. Because here's what I've learned after years of observing people's financial behaviors. Personal finance is only about 20% math and 80% psychology. You can know all the right things to do: budget, save, invest, avoid debt. But if you don't understand why you make the financial decisions you make, you'll keep sabotaging yourself. It's like knowing that eating vegetables is healthy, but still reaching for pizza every night. One of the biggest psychological traps I see people fall into is what researchers call lifestyle inflation. You get a raise, and instead of saving that extra money, you upgrade your apartment, buy a nicer car, start eating out more often. Before you know it, you're making more money than ever, but feeling just as financially stressed as before. This happens because we're wired to adapt to our circumstances. That fancy new car that felt like such a luxury at first, 3 months later, it's just your normal car. But the payment is still there, eating into your budget every month. Another psychological factor that wreaks havoc on financial plans is what's called present bias. We overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue future benefits. It's why a $5 coffee feels insignificant, but saving $1,800 a year by making coffee at home feels abstract and difficult. The most successful people I've observed have found ways to work with their psychology instead of against it. They make saving and investing as automatic and painless as possible. They find ways to make future goals feel more real and immediate. For example, instead of just saying, "I want to retire comfortably," they might calculate exactly how much they need and create a visual representation of their progress. Maybe it's a chart on the wall. Maybe it's an app that shows their growing net worth. Maybe it's regular check-ins with their future self. Social pressure is another huge factor that people don't talk about enough. We live in a culture that celebrates spending and consumption. Social media makes it seem like everyone else is living this amazing, expensive lifestyle. It's hard to stick to your budget when your Instagram feed is full of friends at expensive restaurants and exotic vacations. The reality is that most of those people are either going into debt to maintain that lifestyle, or they're only showing you the highlights while dealing with financial stress behind the scenes. Remember, nobody posts pictures of their credit card statements or their sleepless nights worrying about money. Common mistakes and how to avoid them. Let me share some of the most common financial mistakes I've seen people make, not to make. You feel bad if you've made them, but to help you recognize and avoid them going forward. The first big mistake is trying to time the market. I've watched people sit on the sidelines with their investment money, waiting for the perfect time to buy. They wait for the market to crash so they can buy low, but when it actually crashes, they get scared and wait for it to recover. Meanwhile, they miss years of potential growth. The research on this is crystal clear. Time in the market beats timing the market. The most successful investors are the ones who invest consistently regardless of what the market is doing. They understand that short-term volatility is the price you pay for long-term growth. Another mistake I see constantly is not having adequate emergency funds before investing. People get excited about the potential returns from investing and put every extra dollar into the stock market. Then when an emergency comes up, they have to sell their investments at possibly the worst time to raise cash. Here's a related mistake: borrowing against your 401k. Yes, technically you're borrowing from yourself, but you're also missing out on potential growth on that money. Plus, if you leave your job for any reason, that loan typically becomes due immediately. If you can't pay it back, it's treated as an early withdrawal with taxes and penalties. Credit card churning is something that seems to be getting more popular, especially among young people who see influencers talking about travel rewards and cash back. While it's possible to game the credit card system for rewards, it requires incredible discipline and organization. Most people who try it end up spending more than they otherwise would, negating any rewards they earn. One mistake that's particularly painful to watch is people who get a windfall, maybe a tax refund, a bonus, an inheritance, and immediately spend it on something fun instead of using it to improve their financial position. I get it, windfalls feel like free money, but they're actually incredible opportunities to fast-track your financial goals. The other big category of mistakes involves not planning for the predictable. Your car will need repairs. Your appliances will break down. You'll have medical expenses. Your income will fluctuate. These aren't emergencies. They're predictable parts of life that you should be planning and budgeting for. Creating your personal financial system. Now let's talk about creating a financial system that actually works for your real life. Because here's what I've learned. The perfect financial plan that you don't follow is worthless. The mediocre plan that you stick with consistently will make you wealthy over time. The first step is accepting that your financial system needs to match your personality and lifestyle. If you hate budgeting, don't try to create some elaborate budget with 50 categories. Find a simpler approach that you can actually maintain. If you're not tech-savvy, don't feel like you need to use the latest financial apps. Pen and paper work just fine if that's what you'll actually use. Successful financial systems have a few things in common. They're simple enough to understand and follow. They're automated as much as possible to remove the need for constant decision-making. They include regular check-ins to make sure you're on track. And they have built-in flexibility for when life throws you curveballs. Here's a basic system that works for a lot of people. Set up automatic transfers to handle your financial priorities as soon as you get paid. Emergency fund contribution, retirement contribution, debt payments, regular savings, all automatic. Then you can spend whatever's left without guilt, knowing you've already taken care of your financial future. The key is making your financial priorities invisible to your day-to-day decision-making. When the money for savings and investments disappears before you can spend it, you don't miss it. You adapt your lifestyle to what's left, just like you'd adapt to any other fixed expense. Regular financial check-ins are crucial, but they don't need to be overwhelming. Maybe once a month, you sit down and review your accounts. Are you on track with your goals? Do you need to adjust anything? Has your situation changed in a way that requires updating your plan? These check-ins also help you celebrate progress, which is important for staying motivated. It's easy to get discouraged when building wealth feels slow, but when you can look back and see how much progress you've made over the past year, it reinforces that your system is working. Don't forget to plan for success. What happens when you pay off that credit card? What happens when you hit your emergency fund goal? Having a plan for these milestones prevents you from backsliding and helps you maintain momentum toward your next goal. The long view, building a rich life. As we wrap up, I want to talk about what I think is the real purpose of personal finance, building what I call a rich life. And by rich, I don't necessarily mean having millions of dollars, though that might be part of it. I mean having the financial foundation to live life on your own terms. A rich life might mean having enough saved that you don't stress about money. It might mean being able to take time off work to care for a sick family member without worrying about income. It might mean having the flexibility to take a lower-paying job that you love. It might mean being able to help your kids pay for college, or retire early, or travel the world. The beautiful thing about personal finance is that it's deeply personal. Your rich life probably looks different from mine, and that's exactly how it should be. The key is being intentional about what you want your money to enable in your life, and then building a financial plan that supports those goals. One thing I've noticed about people who successfully build wealth is that they think in decades, not months or years. They understand that building real financial security is a marathon, not a sprint. They make decisions based on where they want to be in 10 or 20 years, not just where they want to be next month. This long-term thinking helps them avoid the get-rich-quick schemes and financial fads that derail so many people. They're not looking for the hot stock tip or the investment strategy that will double their money overnight. They're focused on the boring, proven strategies that compound over time. But here's the balance that's crucial to understand. While you're building for the future, you also need to enjoy the present. The goal isn't to live like a monk for 30 years so you can be wealthy when you're old. It's to find a sustainable balance that lets you enjoy life now while also securing your future. This might mean spending money on things that truly matter to you while cutting ruthlessly on things that don't. Maybe you love travel, so you budget for one great trip a year while driving an older car and cooking at home most nights. Maybe you're passionate about your hobby, so you invest in quality equipment while being frugal in other areas. The key insight is that you can't have everything, but you can have the things that matter most to you if you're willing to make trade-offs. Elsewhere, personal finance is ultimately about making conscious choices about how to allocate your limited resources to create maximum satisfaction and security. As you start implementing these concepts, remember that progress isn't always linear. You'll have setbacks, unexpected expenses, months where you can't save as much as you planned. That's normal and expected. The important thing is to get back on track as quickly as possible and keep moving forward. Also remember that personal finance is a skill that improves with practice. The more you work with budgets, the better you get at estimating expenses. The more you invest, the more comfortable you become with market volatility. The more you track your spending, the more aware you become of your patterns and triggers. Finally, don't be afraid to seek help when you need it. Whether that's reading books, listening to podcasts, taking a financial education class, or working with a professional, continuing to learn and improve your financial knowledge is one of the best investments you can make. Your financial journey is unique to you, but you don't have to figure it all out alone. There are resources, tools, and people who can help you along the way. The most important step is simply starting, wherever you are, with whatever you have. Building wealth and financial security is one of the most empowering things you can do for yourself and your family. It gives you options, reduces stress, and creates opportunities. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Start today. Stay consistent and trust the process. Your future self will thank you.
Investor, info delivered, mission complete. This was Michael on WalletWise, where smart strategies lead to real results. Make your money count. See you next time. That's a wrap for WalletWise.